Corporal Michael Gabot. Last name is spelled G-A-B-O-T.
Thank you.
And Corporal, how are you employed?
I'm employed with the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. Scene.
Right. Were you provided on your way there any information regarding the call or regarding anything like that?
In my initial receipt of the information for the call, regarding my response, I was informed that the shooting involved potentially an accidental shooting where two children were shot at a residence within our District 1 area, which is in the north part of Hillsborough County.
All right. Were you able to hear the 911 call?
I was.
All right. And did you hear that before you went to the scene or on your way to the scene?
I reviewed a 911 call as I responded to the scene, so prior to my arrival.
All right. What did you do when you got to the scene?
When I got to the scene, I met with my supervisor at the time, which was Corporal Florio, now Sergeant Florio, other detectives, and the deputies on scene, and I ultimately reviewed some body-worn camera.
All right. And do you recall whose body-worn camera you reviewed at the time?
Deputy Scott Rainey.
All right. Did you go into the apartment at that time?
I did not.
All right. What did you do next?
After reviewing the body-worn camera and receiving my assignment as a lead investigator, I responded to Tampa General Hospital.
And why did you go out to Tampa General Hospital?
I was informed that Jayla Bass was the...
Sustained.
Without telling us what you were informed, what was your purpose in going to the hospital versus staying at the scene?
I responded to the hospital to check on the victims.
Okay. When you got there, were you able to check on the victims?
I was.
All right. Who else were both victims there, or were they in separate hospitals?
Both victims were in the same hospital in separate rooms.
Okay. By the time you arrived there, was Jayla Bass pronounced deceased?
She was.
Okay. Was Jermaine Bass, the son, was he still alive at that point, obviously?
He was.
Okay. And what was his condition when you got there?
He was incapacitated in a hospital room.
Okay. Was he awake, coherent, anything like that?
He was not awake. He was alive. I could see an obvious wound to his head, but he was unresponsive.
All right.
She had just been informed at the time that her child was deceased, that Jayla Bass was deceased, and she was very difficult. She was very difficult to interview. She was crying. She was in the process of what I determined to be grieving at that time.
All right.
And other personnel from HCSO were inside of the residence. So I entered into the residence, met with personnel inside of there, received a brief walkthrough, and assisted with a search of a bedroom.
All right. And the search of which bedroom did you assist with?
It was the bedroom that was identified as belonging to the parents.
Now, the jurors by this point have now seen plenty of pictures of the residence and know, so they're familiar with the room you're discussing. Can you tell us what you did as far as assisting in the search of that particular room?
Primarily, I assisted with a search of the closet.
Okay. Were you there when the dresser drawer was searched, the silver dresser?
I was in the room when it was searched.
All right. And were you there when the firearm was recovered?
I was.
All right. And did you see them remove the firearm from the actual dresser?
I did.
When the firearm was removed, were you able to observe whether or not it was loaded with any bullets?
It was not loaded.
All right. Was the magazine within the firearm at the time that it was removed from the dresser?
I believe it was separate from the firearm. I don't recall specifically.
Were there any other live rounds within that magazine?
There were not.
What type of firearm was this?
It was a Glock 42 firearm.
And what type of bullets does the Glock 42 take?
It fires .380 auto caliber ammunition.
Is this a common type of firearm?
Relatively common, yes.
What type of firearm like this issued for the sheriff's office?
The sheriff's office has issued Glock 45 as the primary duty weapon, which fires 9mm.
Okay. Which one is a stronger caliber, or does it matter?
Relevance?
Overruled.
So the 9mm and the .380 caliber use a similar size projectile. It's approximately a .357. But the 9mm has a larger case with more powder in it, and therefore it's a higher charge version of a .380. Completed an initial request for call detail records with the phone company, which was T-Mobile. And then later, ultimately, I completed a search warrant for a more detailed information related to that phone number.
Right. And in this particular case, when it says subscriber named Jermaine Bass, is that in fact who the owner of that phone number is, based on their records?
Yes, it is.
It indicates an outgoing call on August 30th of 2022 at 02:34:58. What time is that? Would that time be here in Tampa at that moment?
That would have been 8/29/2022 at 10:34 p.m. with 58 seconds.
So that would have been approximately 1 to 2 minutes after the 911 call was made in this case.
Objection meeting.
Sustained.
How long after the 911 call would that have been?
Sometime between 1 and 2 minutes after the initial 911 call.
All right. And what is that call, if you can tell the jury?
That is an outgoing call to phone number 813-516-3376.
All right. And that is an outgoing call, meaning someone made that call from that phone at that time.
That's correct.
Now, can you tell whether or not that phone was answered?
From the duration of the call being 5 seconds, even though the call says it's completed successfully, in my experience as an investigator, that typically means the call was not answered and it went to voicemail.
Okay. Were you able to determine who that phone number was that he was calling?
I was.
And whose number was that?
It was LaQuanza Thomas, who is Jermaine Bass, the defendant's mother.
All right. And did your office, did the sheriff's office obtain that video, that surveillance video?
They did.
And did you notice anything of interest on those videos?
Yes, I did.
Okay. What did you see?
There's vehicles that are seen coming and leaving and then returning to the area of the incident scene prior to the 911 call being received, and those two vehicles are going to be determined to be Shirley Bass's vehicles. She owned both of them.
What two vehicles did she own?
She owned a Mercedes C300 and a Nissan Titan pickup. Both of them were white.
Now, if you could, I'm going to pause this real quick. I'm happy to do this. If you could, Corporal, could you stand and show the jury so that they can see where the cars, the vehicles you are referring to are located, and if you can describe it so it's clear for the record.
They're going to be to the top right of the screen, and the white vehicle, the white pickup truck here is going to be Shirley Bass's Nissan Titan, and the vehicle just to the left or to the right of it, from the perspective of the vehicle, left of it on the screen, is going to be her white Mercedes C300.
Okay. Corporal, we did see on that video what appeared to be that Mercedes that you pointed out earlier pull away. Is that what you were notifying or explaining to the jury?
That's correct.
Okay.
So in this video, in approximately 8 minutes, the Nissan Titan door is going to open and the vehicle is going to drive away.
All right, and that's the truck you were referring to earlier?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, so we just observed that Nissan truck, and that is at 19:04:30, correct?
That's correct.
So that would be 7:04:30 p.m., which we now know is 7:05:30 p.m.
That's correct.
All right. Detective, real quick, because we just kind of looked through that. You've watched that video before, correct?
I have.
Do you see anyone get into that in the passenger side of that vehicle?
Not that I can see from the video.
So now, Corporal, we are now at 22:10:08. What time is that? And like for people who are not on the military time?
It's going to be 10:10 p.m. on the video.
Okay. And which we know now is 10:11 p.m.
Correct.
Okay. Detective, real quick, what do we see in this video before? Well, hold on, just go ahead.
Judge, I'm just going to object to the corporal narrating.
That's why I stopped. Now, Corporal, in this video, we see that truck that you described earlier coming in. Was that the significance of this video?
It was.
And again, in watching that video, do you ever see any children or anyone get out of the passenger side or anyone else get out of the vehicle other than the driver?
Yeah, I'm going to object to the corporal narrating the video.
Right, overruled.
I do not. To the left of it in the video, but to the right of it physically to the vehicle, which is where Shirley Bass's Mercedes is going to pull back in.
And Corporal, while this is playing, where is their front door in relation to where this video is?
It's just off camera to the right.
So somewhat behind that Nissan truck on the video?
Correct. It's in the video would be in the area behind the truck, sort of obstructed by the leaves of the tree.
Yeah, just leave it. Let it play through. Yeah, just keep going. Detective, it's now 10:33:10. We see an individual walk past. Did you ever identify who that individual was?
I did.
And who was that?
It was Shirley Bass.
And Corporal, while this is playing, where the individual you identified as Shirley Bass walked to, the individual known as Daquan Evans who called 911, does he live back in that location where she was walking towards?
Yes, he does.
Okay. And Corporal, we're at 10:34:06, and it appears she has something in her hand. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And it's up to her ear. That's at the phone.
Correct. It looks like she has it at one point, at some points out at her ear, and then at some points in her hand, and she's looking down at it.
What's the other one for? All right, we have one more. This is the last one. What time are we at here?
This is going to be 10:35 and 26 seconds on August 29th, 22nd on the video. However, it's approximately 1 minute later also, so approximately 10:36 p.m. and 26 seconds.
Corporal, we see an individual walking around out there. Were you able to identify who that was?
The person at the far end or the person closer to the tree?
Closer to the tree right there.
I'm not aware if that person was identified personally.
And what do you say the person at the far end?
There's a person walking around near the area where Shirley Bass's C300 is, and I believe that's Shirley Bass.
Okay. All right, Corporal, we are now at 2241 or 1041, which I guess would be 1042. What do we see happening here in the corner up there?
This is capturing the arrival of law enforcement, the first law enforcement officers who arrived to the incident scene.
And do we see the law enforcement interaction with Ms. Bass at that time?
We do.
Okay. Yeah, I just remember. All right, thanks. All right, Corporal, you had reviewed those videos back when you obtained it, correct?
Correct. When the sheriff's office obtained the video, I was able to review it.
Okay. Now, the person you identified as Shirley Bass, how long would you say, or how long were you able to time how long It was when the Mercedes arrived to when she's observed walking out of the house and walking around in the parking lot.
Judge, just again, I'm going to object to the courtroom narrating the video. It's up to the
Sure.
jury.
All right, overruled.
It's approximately 8 minutes.
Okay.
The license plate reader. However, in the District 1 area, in the direction that a vehicle would typically travel to get from the Bass residence at the time to the West Shore area, there were at least 3 sites, 3 intersections that included cameras.
So just to orient the jury, that was Fletcher Avenue that we're looking at?
That's correct.
Okay. And towards from the right of the screen to the left of the screen, is that the westbound direction?
That is.
And that would be heading towards the interstate?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, Corporal, so once again, we observed that truck you described crossing through. Is this from that same intersection?
It's the same intersection, however, this camera is pointed north on 15th Street.
Okay. All right, what are we looking at here?
I believe this is 22nd Street, which is to the east. So it is actually going to be slightly before, and it is also going to be the Nissan Titan traveling westbound.
All right, let me play it again. So just so for the jury, where is Fletcher Avenue on this?
Fletcher Avenue is the main road that's going from left to right, and then 22nd Street is the road that's going sort of, let me stand up. This is Fletcher Avenue going left to right, and this is 22nd Street.
In which direction is west for the jury?
West is this way towards the left.
Okay. I'm going to replay that one since we didn't know that ahead of time. So. Sorry. All right. Pause this real quick. And what are we looking at here again?
This is just the same intersection, same time, just another camera also pointed northbound.
Okay.
Actually, I believe this camera may actually be pointed southbound.
All right, so I paused it at 22 seconds into this, or I'm sorry, 11 seconds into this video. We see a vehicle near the Exxon. Is that the vehicle in question that we're talking about, the Nissan truck?
It is, and I misspoke earlier, this camera is pointed northbound.
Okay. And so that Nissan truck would be heading in a westbound direction,
That's correct.
which would be towards the interstate.
That's correct. And this is before the prior video we saw from 15th Street, approximately 1 minute.
Okay. All right, now I'm going down to the one that says Fletcher, Nebraska. Oh, this didn't load properly. All right, it didn't load exactly properly, but what were we looking at in that video? And this is a video that says 9/2/2022 at 9:29 a.m. It says EOC Fletcher, Nebraska. I'll play it again, see if it loads right. No, for some reason it's not loading. Let me pause it right here, though. Where are we looking at from this video, from what you can see from that part of it?
This is the intersection of Fletcher Avenue and Nebraska Avenue. This is going to be west of 15th Street and even further west from 22nd Street. This is approximately one traffic light or intersection before the highway for Interstate 275. This camera is pointed south. Fletcher Avenue is the main road where that silver vehicle is now traveling east on, and the vehicle in question is going to be traveling west on Fletcher Avenue.
Okay, so it would be going on this video left to right on it, correct?
That's correct.
All right, we just saw it. Was that what we saw pass, the Nissan truck?
That's correct.
All right. Now, those were from earlier in the day. Did they correspond and match the times that you recovered those videos from the time that that you observed the Nissan truck leaving the residence at Heritage Club?
The times that we see the video, the vehicle on the Eye on Crime cameras traveling westbound were consistent with the vehicle leaving from the Heritage Club apartment complex and traveling west towards Interstate 275.
All right. Did you obtain video from later in the day showing that vehicle coming in the opposite direction?
Yes, we did.
All right. Go back up. Not sure why this computer is giving us a hard time. Try and play it again. Not sure why it's not loading properly, but. All right, at that point in time, we just see a white Nissan truck go by. Is that the truck that you are identifying as being the defendant's?
It is.
Okay, and do you recall what time it was that this was taken from the poll camera?
This is 22, I believe, 11 hours, so 10, 11 p.m.
Okay, and in this video, that truck is heading eastbound, is that accurate?
That's correct.
And that would be back in the direction of where Heritage Club Apartments is?
That's correct.
And does that match up with the time that the truck is actually observed coming back into the apartment complex?
Yes. As part of my investigation, I conducted a query of an approximate timeline it would take to arrive from the intersections where we see the Nissan Titan during that date and that time and that approximate traffic pattern, and it was consistent with the arrival time that we see the Nissan arrive back to the apartment complex.
All right. All right, well, I think the jury understands, and so they'll have this back to look at. After obtaining the call detail records, do you obtain are you able to learn or follow where that phone goes throughout that evening?
As part of the receipt of the call detail records pursuant to the search warrant that I authored and was sent over to T-Mobile, I received some location data which was for the travel location approximate to the cell phone.
Okay, and where did, well, someone else will testify to that, but you, did it confirm that in fact the vehicle, when the time the vehicle leaves, does it appear that the phone leaves as well?
Object to lack of predicate by the foundation.
Sustained.
Did you observe the map of the location data from where the phones were on that day?
I did.
Okay. And did you compare it with the video that you have of when that Nissan truck, Nissan Titan, leaves the residence?
I did.
Okay. And then with the location of travel, did the defendant's phone appear to match the location of travel of the Nissan Titan?
Same objection, Judge.
Sustained.
Met with Marlene Gaston, who advised Shirley Bass had stepped out. I met with hospital staff who confirmed she had stepped out. So I arranged to meet her I responded later in the day, met with her, and conducted a second interview later in the day.
Okay. And in fact, hospital staff has Ms. Bass leaving the hospital much earlier than what Marlene told you, correct?
The hospital staff had her leaving at approximately 9:30 in the morning.
Okay, and Marlene gave you a much later time.
Marlene, I believe she told me she stepped out for
Judge, may we
care.
approach?
Sure. Okay, so that's on August 31st, and then at some point Shirley Bass will return to the hospital.
Correct.
Okay, and you then, as you've indicated, conduct a second interview with her that day.
That's correct.
Was anybody else present with you in the room as for the first interview? Anybody present?
In the first interview, present total was me, myself, Detective Vertu, as the law enforcement investigators, and then Shirley Bass and Marlene Gadsden in the room, in that family room within Tampa General Hospital.
And then for the second interview, who's present?
Present with me during the second interview was Detective Brunel, who was another detective in the homicide section at the time of the sheriff's office, and Shirley Bass, and then a CPI was in the interview the entire time. However, during the interview, at some point, for victim services, one of the victim specialists came in the room.
Okay. And that was pretty extensive as well, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Now, I have the third interview being the next day, September 1st of 2022. You had received the surveillance in this case, some of the surveillance we have looked at today, and you had some follow-up questions you wanted to ask Ms. Bass, correct?
That's correct.
All right. That's a shorter interview. That's brief.
Comparatively, yes.
Right, okay. During the course of this investigation, you found Shirley Bass difficult to reach on the phone if you tried to call her, correct?
At times, yes, she was very difficult to reach on the phone.
Okay. Now, the next contact I have for you, Corporal, is the execution of the search warrant that you got for Shirley's buccal swab. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And I have that date as May 7th of 2023.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Okay. And at that time, you got the buccal swab from Miss Bass pursuant to the court order, and you asked her more questions, and you spoke with her about DNA and things like that.
I don't recall the substance. I executed the search warrant. I don't recall much more from the conversation.
Okay. In that situation on that day, you arrived early, did you not?
I did.
Okay. And Miss Bass, at that point, shows up and refused to allow the interview to take place, correct?
Correct.
All right. And basically left Mary Lee House. Is that fair?
She ultimately did leave after a conversation with myself and the detective.
Okay. And in fact, since you were there early, you knew that she had arrived late, correct?
Yes.
All right. But in fact, she asserted she had been waiting an extended period of time.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Sustained.
Okay. All right. All right, so the interview did not take place in the morning of September 7th of 22 that day, correct?
Correct.
All right. At that point, the interview did not take place either, did it?
It did not.
Okay. And it did not take place because JJ was uncooperative, correct?
That's correct.
Right. He was hitting his mother.
Correct.
He was poorly behaved.
That's correct.
He was disruptive and refused to speak.
That's correct.
In addition, JJ was being disrespectful to the adults.
That's correct.
Do you remember? Okay. And basically, on those two occasions when you had contacts with him, he was cooperative with you and with your crime scene unit.
That's correct.
Right. You had contact with him collecting his clothes, taking photographs on August 30th. Sound correct?
That's correct.
All right. And then you went back to get his buccal, like we've talked about everybody else's, on October 10th of 2022.
That's correct.
And in fact, there were times, and I don't know if it's once or twice, you can tell me, that you tried to call China Gadsden to speak with her, and she would hang up on you.
That's correct.
Right. And you actually audioed that so we could hear it.
That's correct.
Now, let's go to this attempt to interview JJ. Do you know the reasons why she did not want to have you interview JJ?
She specifically told
Well,
me.
without telling you, did she tell you?
She did tell me.
Okay. Now, let's set the stage for this. This was on September the 7th, correct?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Her daughter had been killed on August the 30th, so approximately a week before.
That's correct.
Do you know whether she'd even had the funeral at this time?
Objection, relevance?
Overruled.
I know she was planning a funeral.
Okay.
Dispute about this evidence. And in this case, the stipulation is as follows. Jermaine Bass, JJ, the son of the defendant, the victim named in counts 3 and 4 in the indictment in this cause, has been interviewed by both the defense and the state of Florida. Both sides agree that JJ has no memory of the events leading up to or occurring on the night of August 29th, 2022. Due to his lack of memory, the state and defense agree that he will not be called as a witness. And this stipulation or agreement is signed by Ms. Schlemmer, by Mr. Bass, and by Mr. Terry, the state attorney. And
The Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you worked for the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office?
It'll be 10 years next month.
What do you do there?
I'm a criminal intelligence analyst in the Criminal Investigations Division.
Is this a map you created along with your experience and involvement in this investigation?
It is, yeah.
Can you read out to the jury the phone number that was used in order to map in this investigation?
That's 813-696-7195.
Do I have permission to publish to the jury, Your Honor?
yes.
What we're looking at in States 21A, an example of the mapping that you just discussed.
Yes.
So you use the information provided within the T-Mobile records, you put it in this program, and this is what it spits out.
This screenshot is, exactly.
Okay, so I want to talk about the map. Let's orient the jury what we're looking for in the map, okay? On the bottom left-hand portion, I see West Shore. I'm pointing to it with my finger. In fact, there is a line right through the word West Shore. Is that West Shore Boulevard here in Tampa?
Yeah, West Shore Boulevard is in that area, and that West Shore is denoting that that's kind of the area, West Shore.
Right above that, we see another line and it's two lines together. It looks like almost kind of a pie chart situation right above Tampa International Airport. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Can you zoom for the jurors, please?
Oh, sure. And for the record, I'm zooming in so that we get a closer look at what I just pointed out to be the West Shore in the bottom left-hand corner area, and what the witness has described as Tampa International Airport right before that. Right to the left of Tampa International Airport, we see symbols that look like it would be some sort of highway with a circle, a white circle that has numbers on it. What is that representing?
Yeah, that's showing 589, excuse me, and this is using actually like Google Maps information.
And then if we go up in the middle, we're seeing two half pie graph almost situations. To the right of that, we're seeing University Square. Tell us what area we're looking at now.
Yeah, the university area or the University Square area.
Right through that, we see yellow lines and a marker that is commonly known to be an interstate marker. Tell the jury what interstate marker that would be.
I-275.
We see a full circle, which again indicates to you that the cell phone is bouncing off this tower,
Yes.
correct?
Yes,
But it's not indicating to you a location in which it's heading. Is that safe to say?
exactly.
Now, we see a line with, it's an arrow, to the right of the circle, and we see a text box that I'm pointing to. It's the topmost portion on the right side text box. Explain to us what that means, that text box.
It starts with the E node B, the sector, and the azimuth, which is all going to be tower information. That azimuth is blank. I just have a dash there because we don't have a direction, and that's actually where that would come from. The location is followed by that, and that's literally the latitude and longitude of the tower. And then we have the date and the time, and it was an incoming call from this phone number, 361-217-7632. And the duration is 0 seconds. There was no duration.
So we have that at 6:04:03 p.m. Next in time, we see to the left, two lines intersecting, right encompassing the words University Mall. It encompasses the two first letters U and N. Explain to the jury, and if you need to stand up and point or come over here and point, Judge, does she have permission to do that?
Sure.
If you
Probably
can,
going to you is probably best.
yes, ma'am. If you can please come around so that you can point to yourself on the Elmo.
Make sure you describe with words too.
So specifically, and I'm going to rearrange. We see a top text box on the top left corner. I'm pointing to it right now. From that text box, we see a red or orange arrow pointing to the pie graph encompassing the first two letters of the word University Mall. Now, I noticed that this graph we're looking at, the symbol is different than the circle. And if you don't mind, can you come around this way and stand right there to point so that we're just not blocking the jurors? Can you point to the University Mall one and explain to the jury the difference between the circle we just saw and the information that it provides to you and this pie graph that we're looking at that's kind of like a semicircle with two lines? What's the difference?
So in the original one, the circle, right in the middle of that is going to be where that tower is, where that line is inside that circle. Instead, on this one, it's where these two lines meet. The tower is actually going to be right there. And we get that southeast direction because it's kind of facing southeast.
The semicircle that we see shaded in connecting those two lines, what does the semicircle symbolize to you?
This is just a display. It's half a mile out from the tower. That does not mean that the cell phone was half a mile out from the tower. It's a traditional kind of display for this type of information.
And let's talk about the text box that's associated. We pointed out before the top most left one. We see it says the E node B, the sector, and explain to us, the one before didn't have an azimuth. What is an azimuth?
Yeah, this azimuth is 120, and that's a degree out of 360 of a circle. So that 120 gives us the southeast. That's what the azimuth is.
So the 120 or the numbers next to the word azimuth indicate to you a directionality
Exactly.
of the cell phone itself or of the tower.
That's the direction the cell phone was in from the tower.
So the cell phone in relation to the tower, you can tell to a certain degree.
Yes.
Okay, so in this one we see 120. Now we see the location, which you indicated before going call number is.
That's 813-516-3376.
Now, outgoing call, does that mean the number listed above, 813-696-7195, is the one who dialed out?
Exactly.
And if we see a label later on, incoming call, does that mean that the number listed below the words incoming call placed the call and dialed to 813-696-7195?
Exactly.
Okay, so the next in time, we see 7:16:04 p.m. For the record, I am pointing out a text box that is the second from the top on the top left side. We see an arrow coming from that pointing to two lines that intersect with a semicircle. It is right below, encompassing the bottom portion of the N on North Tampa. I see that to be to the left of Busch Gardens, Tampa Bay. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, tell us what information you were able to receive and what that line and semicircle means to you based on this information.
So exactly like before, those two lines intersect, and that's where that tower is. But what's different this time is it's facing northeast. In addition, we've got this incoming call from 813-516-3376, and it was a duration of 65 seconds.
So this number, 813-516-3376, placed a call that was answered by 813-696-7195. And we've previously identified that the 696-7195 belongs to the defendant. So let's talk about the next call in time. We see, let me get it on the map correctly. 8:37 p.m. We see it's the third text box on the left side, touching the left portion of the map. We see arrow coming below, and we see two lines with a semicircle right above the words Tampa International Airport. Tell us what information you were able to gather during your investigation about this specific time, August 29th, 2022 at 8:37:56 p.m.
There's actually another one that's at 8:20, which was just before it.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so 8:20, here we go. 8:20 and 43 seconds. We see this one almost looks like a straight line with more of a semicircle than we've seen before, right below the words West Shore, with an arrow coming out the bottom corner of a text box. If you're looking at the graph, it would be second from the bottom text box to the left. We see at 8:29:22, at 8:20:43 p.m. Tell us what that symbol is, because it looks a little different than the other ones that we've seen so far.
I had to divide this one into the left sector and the right sector because that tower is used multiple times, but with different sectors. So this one in particular, 8:20, is the left sector, this one right here.
Okay.
And that's going to be an incoming call from the 727-315-3379 number. And the duration.
It's 3329.
Oh, I'm sorry about
Well,
that.
you are backwards, so it's okay.
It's upside down.
Yes.
And that duration is 0 seconds on that one.
Okay, so what does the 0 seconds indicate to you?
It most likely was not answered, or it didn't complete.
Okay, so that's 8:20 and 43 seconds. Then we have 8:37 and 56 seconds. This is the one that we were talking about before, where there is a symbols above Tampa International Airport. Tell us what you know from your investigation of this specific symbol at 8:29 on August 29th of 2022 at 8:37:56 p.m.
So this one is facing practically north, and it's an incoming call from 727, let me not mess this up, 315-3329, and that duration is 0.
Let me just, sorry. I want to make sure this is in the correct position. So then we see a text box on the right, it's the right bottom quarter, and we see at 8:29:22 at 10 o'clock with 30 seconds p.m. Tell us what information that you were able to gather during your investigation about this specific area.
So we are now on the right side of this tower that we've talked about before, that's just in this West Shore area. And this is an outgoing call to 727-315-3329, and it was a duration of 15 seconds.
Right below that, included in the same text box, we see 8:29:22 at 10 p.m. and 54 seconds. Tell us what you were able to learn about that specific hit off the cell tower.
Yep, it's the same right side, the outgoing call to 727-315-3329 for 5 seconds.
Let's move below the bottommost portion. We have, there we go, it's centered now. A text box on the bottom. And we see at 8:29 of 2022, 10:01 p.m. and 43 seconds, an outgoing call to 727-315-3329 with a duration of 43 seconds. Show the jury where that cell tower pinged.
So the tower is right here where these two lines intersect, and we're a little bit farther south from the other tower that we've been talking about, still in the West Shore area, and it's facing basically north or northeast.
Now we're going to, we're looking at the top quadrant. We've already discussed the topmost portion of the text box. and we see that the circle that we have has an arrow next to it with a text box we already talked about from 6:04 p.m. But below that, it looks like there's 2 other phone calls. So I want to discuss 8/29/2022 at 10:19 p.m. and 37 seconds. Tell us what you learned during your investigation.
So it is this one with the full circle here, and it is an incoming call from 727-315-3329.
Below that, oh, sorry, go ahead. Okay. Below that, we see it's within the same text box, August 29th of 2022. We see at 10:34 p.m. and 58 seconds. Tell the jury what you found out during your investigation.
That one is an outgoing call, and it is to 813-516-3379, and that duration is 5 seconds.
And that information indicates to you that this phone number belonging to the defendant called out at 10:34 p.m. and 58 seconds, correct?
Yes.
You have plotted that cell phone is in that direction from that tower.
Exactly.
Okay. It doesn't mean it's in that shaded area at the time.
Right, exactly.
It just means it's in the direction from the tower. So in this case, we would have, I think you said, is it southeast, or for that first one it's 7:15?
Southeast.
Southeast, okay. So we don't know how far. It's not in the shaded area, but somewhere that phone is in that direction, southeast, from that area.
Exactly.
Okay. So
My name is Jennifer Michaelon, Jennifer, Michaelon, Michelon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Tell the jury, where do you work?
I work for the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office in the firearms section of the Forensic Service Bureau. I received bullets and cartridge cases in this case, and I obtained them from the evidence section, and then I brought them back in order to compare them to my test fires of this firearm.
How many test fires did you have when you test fired this firearm?
I test fired this firearm twice.
How many do you use of the? How many of the test fires do you use when you're placing it on the microscope and you're looking at it in comparison to the ones that you're provided from the scene?
I used 1 bullet, 1 cartridge case.
Is that standard?
You could use multiple test fires if needed, or multiple bullets or cartridge cases. It depends on the scenario.
Did you need to do that in this case?
In this particular case, I did not.
Why?
They were well marked.
Okay, so you test fire it, you have a test casing and a test projectile. How many projectiles did you receive either from the scene or from the deceased?
I received 3 fired bullets and 1 fired bullet core.
Did you compare those bullets to your test fire?
I compared the fired bullets to each other and to the test fire.
What's the purpose of comparing the fired bullets to each other?
I had originally, when I was going through to see the individual characteristics, I noticed that they all had the same individual characteristics, and I could see marks that looked similar on each of them as I put each one up individually, and then I put them up together to just index them or mark them to see those patterns were the same at that point.
After you compared the test fire,
I identified them to the firearm.
are you talking the firearm in front of you, State's Exhibit 16?
Yes.
Does that mean that the projectiles that you were provided and used during your analysis came from State's Exhibit 16, the Glock 42 that's in front of you?
Yes.
In this case?
In this particular case, I ID'd each cartridge case back to a test fire.
Okay. And that test fire was from this firearm that you were shown a minute ago?
Yes.
When you looked at the ammunition, there was 2 types of ammunition, right, from the casings?
Correct.
And what were the types of ammunition?
There were 2 types, Hornady and Norma.
Okay. And both of those are obviously 380?
Correct.
Now, Ms. Reeder was asking you about the safety features on the Glock, on the firearm in this case, and you said that there's the trigger and the trigger safety, and then there's the firing pin block safety, correct?
There's the trigger safety, the firing pin block safety, and the drop safety.
Okay. And all of those, as you pull back the trigger, will will go along and allow you to fire the gun.
That is correct.
It's not something that you have to do separately. It all kind of goes together as you pull the trigger.
Correct. As you're depressing the trigger along with that trigger safety, and you pull the trigger all the way back, it will disengage the firing pin block safety, allowing that firing pin to flow through the channel.
All right, so the parties have stipulated to an additional fact. The state of Florida and the defendant, Jermaine Bass, stipulate to the following. The person who died on the 29th day of August, 2022, has been identified as Jayla Bass, the individual named in counts 1 and 2 of the indictment in this cause. We're hereby certify the foregoing stipulation is made in good faith for the reasons alleged here and dated the 26th day of February 2025, signed by Mr. Terry, Ms. Schlemmer, and the defendant, Mr. Bass.
There's been no testimony as to any kind of issues going on that would cause Mr. Bass to injure or kill or attempt to kill his children in this case. There's been no testimony as to when he became armed. There's no eyewitness testimony from any other witnesses about what happened inside of that room. We're just relying on those 2 brief statements. The evidence in the case also shows that not only was my client's DNA on the firearm, but his son's DNA was on the trigger and grip as well. And based on all of those issues, as well as the testimony that's been put forward, we would move for a judgment of acquittal as to all counts.
Terry?
Your Honor, both these cases are very distinguishable from our situation at hand. We had Bertram's case it's a one shot. I think both of these are just one shots. Here we have 5 shots directed at the victims, at least 4 we know of for sure, into the victim's head. 3 of them into Jayla Bass's head were all centrally located to the head. It's clear evidence of premeditation. The number of shots, the location of the shots, the fact that these children were helpless and defenseless laying in their bed. And the defendant admitted to being the person who shot and gave an excuse as to it being an accident. However, I believe the state has put forth evidence that this could not have occurred as an accident. And the defendant acknowledging that we do not have to prove motive in this case. And I think just the manner of the shots and the defendant's obvious lie is basis enough to argue premeditation.
Anything else from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
All right, the motion for judgment of acquittal is denied.